Good morning, everyone. This is Luis Gutierrez from ISR Matrix Police Jiu-Jitsu. This will be a first in a series of videos on what police jiu-jitsu is not, and then all the misconceptions around it. I've avoided a few podcast invitations because I wanted to get this out first, because the questions that I know would come and the conversations I'd have to push back against is because it would be pretty much what I've done for 30 years, and I would continue to see the cycle and the pattern. And rather than waste their time and your time through that, I'd rather just talk about what we're doing and what the shifts are and the changes are. So hopefully you can see that I'm not even arguing the same things. I'm actually looking at law enforcement defensive tactics as a universal, talking about baseline standards, and I'm looking about system. So when I began this, it was 1992 is when I began Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And then I opened up my first gym in 95 from a law enforcement officer. So there was a lot of cops at the gym. And obviously I was excited to introduce what this thing was. By 97, 98, I knew it wouldn't work, because though the officers that were training loved it, just like they do today, it wasn't really crossing over beyond that. And when I started teaching different departments, which was late 90s, early 2000s, and then I became very busy, I started flying out and teaching places. It was always the same guys that would attend my seminars. It was DT guys that had martial art backgrounds in other styles, because Jiu-Jitsu was still new. And then they were the fittest, and they were always going to be training, and nothing's changed today. When you watch these studs, these young guys that are black belts in jiu-jitsu, have MMA experiences and have been cops 10, 15 years or so, it's the same group that's around them. It's other guys that are now jiu-jitsu black belts, jiu-jitsu purple belts, or starting jiu-jitsu and training in their early 20s, and they love it. And then again, they run into the same situations when they go back home, which is mid-management administrators don't understand it. How do they translate that to legal departments? How is it explained medically? Does it have any kind of uniformity for the courts or for the social side? Because every law enforcement officer on every scene is a team involved thing, even if they're by themselves or with multiple officers, because when they're there, their legal team is there, their medical is there. As far as the courts are concerned, the courts are there, obviously, and then the public is there. What city do you work in? Who's your mayor? Who's your governor? What state? What times are you working in? All of this plays out into what you're going to do. And the idea of a martial art, it's never going to work, whether it's the Japanese jiu-jitsu of some 70, 80 years, or Brazilian jiu-jitsu, which started trickling into the industry, I guess, in 2004. And when it started going in, I was part of all that. It was like, how much jiu-jitsu can we get across? And, here's the key things. But what I changed in 99 via VHS set that I put together with a good friend of mine is, these are the basics. Let's try to keep it simple and let's see how we can apply them. Even that was difficult, given that I wasn't speaking on the most important things. I was trying to show these 9 tactics. At the time, those 9 tactics were pushed back against me and against him. He was teaching in Chicago, I was teaching in Florida, and then we started traveling out. A lot of the people that are currently teaching today are from that line of instruction. And the thing was, those 9 things became pretty much state approved eventually. We got it approved in Florida, and then, it started spreading out. So what's common now was something that is on those VHS tapes of 99 and 2000. Hasn't changed, but it really didn't come across into something being permanent until like 2012 to 2015, if. And even when I got here to Arizona, some of those techniques weren't being taught correctly, and we'll talk that later in the video series, but that's now normal. The thing is, it's not about techniques at all. So it's not about those 9 techniques or concepts or principles. And it's certainly not about this loose concepts and principles things. This is why I think the best guys in the industry right now are recognizing what we recognized then, which is, can we get the key things that work and make it a system, so it's systematically taught, so then it can be transferred over to those we teach. So again, you watch the math of this full circle. Even if you do that, you're only teaching individuals that are not the norm. It's just a bell curve for law enforcement. And I'm going to speak very bluntly throughout this series. You're going to have blue welfare on one side, a few people that are never going to do anything, and then you're going to have you guys on this side, and then you have the industry. And what I'm trying to do is not equate to either of those sides of the bell curve. I am trying to say, let's hit the industry. Let's see what 90 to 99% of the issues are, and let's fix them. And we've done that in Arizona over the last 2.5 years, because though it was about 8 years ago that it dawned on me what needed to get done and where I was wrong, it wasn't until I was embedded as a defensive tactics coordinator with full support of a department to be able to roll this out. So within a month of me being here, they got rid of the previous program, which is a lot of what we're discussing is happening in the country. And then we implemented this. And within the first few months, you could see the difference on video footage. And then within the first year, there was 86% less strikes to suspects. There was only, I think, 2 or 3 cases of broken bones instead of many. And then training injuries were zero in service, 0 academy. And we will discuss this as we go and why. What has to be understood is as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and MMA trickled into the industry in 2004 or so, there's actually been an increase in in-service training around that because, and it's not Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu's fault and it's not the instructor's fault, is they have 8 to 10 hours a year. And then even if you have a 1 or 3% training outside, when they come in, what do they do with those out? They roll or they work clinch. But if you and I played racquetball for 2 hours and we never play, we're going to be all jacked up and sore or injured if we're older and have previous injuries. It doesn't work. So the idea also that we're going to convince the city or the county or the state to put all this more money into it and cops are going to be training 3 or 4 times a week within a department, that's never going to happen. And we can discuss that as well. As far as going outside of the department, what gyms? Every coach is different. Every gym is different. Who's going to endorse those gyms? How long are those people endorsing those gyms going to be within the positions they are in the law enforcement community or in their department? Because DT instructors shift every few years, management shifts every few years, chiefs shift every 5 or 6 years. It constantly changes. So I hope that this is common sense to most of you, but that's not the discussion that's happening online, and that's what I want to shift. There's this online thing with police departments where you have the bell curve arguing against each other. You have people saying cops are lazy, cops don't want to train, there's not enough money, there's not enough funding. Look at this, look how sloppy this is, and it's just judgment, 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 judgment. It does nothing. It's a big bitch fest. That's all it is. And then on the other side, you have the guys watching that going, all you need is a good uppercut. Oh, I would do this. And they don't even know how to fight, and we know who they are as well. Again, none of that is solving anything, and I've been guilty of it all. So this is just a pattern that I'm done with. At 60 years of age and seeing the success we're about to become the state standard in Arizona, that would be the first time in American history that happens. So as we move forward to this, I hope to share this excitement that I obviously have on the paradigm shift and what it is, and then how you can help in this process. And then as much as possible, let's move towards something where we shift 99% of law enforcement to an actual universal baseline standard that we can all agree upon, and will change things the way it's being changed here in Arizona from department to department to department, and it can actually start spreading and us not waste our time. Lastly, we're very fortunate to have a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu program also that people can come to, officers can train with, that always had 5 or 6 people. Now we're 16 to 25 per times. So you will increase the Jiu-Jitsu because you'll have more people understand what you're doing, but then your Jiu-Jitsu program itself will have to have a policy with it that separates it from police Jiu-Jitsu. What police Jiu-Jitsu is not Japanese Jiu-Jitsu. It's not Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. It's not wrestling for cops. It's none of that. We're not going to build fighters within a department. And this is about subject control, apprehension, and arrest, primarily. This is about passive and active resistance, primarily. We teach everything from this foundation, and you guys can do whatever you'd like with this, and there's no conflicts, to be clear. What we're shifting is, if you look at all the issues in law enforcement, and I saw them in the 70s and 80s, and you can see it through Rodney King and Floyd and all that, it's active resistance where there is no uniform means for officers to have trained and stay calm and make the proper decisions when somebody's trying to get away, essentially, but they think they're in a fight. And this is the joke, and this has been going on forever, and I know it because I've been a part of it, is officers think they're in a fight when they're really not in a fight. So this isn't about that. This is about apprehension and subject control and arrest. So what police jiu-jitsu does is address that, because that is where the riots and the social issues happen, and that's when our administrators freak out and change policy, and then they get rid of DT pretty much altogether. And then a few years pass, there's a new administrator, and then they shift back. I've seen that wave consistently. It doesn't change, and it's going on today. So when you keep hiring somebody who's teaching a particular tactic, when that goes wrong, that contract's going to end. They're going to shut down DT for a bit, and then they're going to bring somebody else eventually because somebody else liked that individual or liked what he was teaching. Again, we're moving away from that. We're making it so every department can have its own police jiu-jitsu program, adjust it as needed because of its personnel and its own dynamics, but stay with these universal baseline standards. And then that we can look across the entire state and hopefully nation and say, this is police jiu-jitsu. This is what we do for active and passive and active resistance. And then if it goes beyond that, you can justify and explain why it did. And then when it returns to it, you can actually pinpoint when it did. This is the big paradigm shift. We're not looking at techniques at all. We're looking at everything from a task and a role perspective, and that alone should tell you, well, what the heck is he talking about, task and role? So the difference is, like I mentioned earlier, every event and incident that an officer is present in is never just him. It's never just his ability. There's a lot more attached to that. Common sense. And therefore, what we want to do is maximize so they understand exactly that they are maximizing their ability to address all these things that come with them to every scene. And it's in the training, it's in the way we teach, it's in the terminology, it's in the curriculum, that if it's passive or active resistance, this is the way we're approaching things. So if you look at that team aspect of it, nobody watched the Super Bowl and was talking about what techniques they were using. No one watches any sport and really talks about technique. It's timing, it's the play, it's what was needed and what was most necessary and how they achieve that. And the people playing those individuals playing that sport each bring their own attributes, each play their position, but each and all are trained specifically for the rules of that game. I understand violence is not a game. I understand that very well. But what I want you to start looking at is, people talk about systems. I want to talk about systems and game theory. I am a big geek. If I didn't do martial arts my entire life, I'm essentially a PE teacher. I would just be reading and researching consistently. The healthiest thing I ever did as a child all the way up through my life is I made my entire existence coaching and training and working with resistance and helping people deal with resistance and aggression and violence. So to be clear, the idea of talking about systems and game theory is so I can shift the paradigm and get you to think differently. So back to sports. If we look at sports, it's not technique. It's not a zillion techniques. We could probably teach anybody else how to play basketball or soccer in a couple of weekends. They would suck, but they understand the game. And then the practice of that, the improvement of that, the development of that wouldn't be too complicated. It's that game and trying to get that game isolated in specific drills to build skills, skill building to play that game. So for passive and active resistance, that's what we're addressing. So when an officer gets to a scene, he identifies what's going on, and then the task involved will be his role, because law enforcement is the only sport, again, deal with the analogy and metaphor for now, where every player plays every position, because that's just the way it is. And that's a lot to ask for, and that's why we made the mistake of 200 or some techniques, or do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. That's a lot of variance. We can't have that, because under pressure, you're not going to go to techniques. You're going to default, and we all know this too. You're going to default to what you've always feels more comfortable and your body feels the safest with. It's going to go there. It's just physiological, and we'll discuss that further down the road. So what we want to do is we want to say, well, in law enforcement, there's always been, if you look at all the manuals, Japanese, Chinese, anywhere in Europe, the States, there's a straight arm bar of some kind, and there's a bent arm bar. So in the 99 VHS set, we talked about the straight arm bar had 2 points of control. We introduced a 2-on-1, 5 points of control. 5 is better than 2. It helped with administrators, and straight arm bar started happening as a 2-on-1. And then there's a bent arm bar, which is the gooseneck and all the other stuff, which Didn't work. So we brought in the wrist weave, which I named the wrist weave, and I was mocked for calling it the wrist weave. You can call it whatever you want. Please don't call it a Russian 201 or an Americana or a Kimura, because that doesn't really play out in courts. So anyway, the idea of this is we have a straight arm bar and a bent arm bar. Well, that's all we're going to ever train to deal with people's limbs. So if we decide and we make the decision to put hands on somebody and we feel it's safe enough and appropriate enough and justifiably enough to take a limb, those are the things we're going to train them most of. And then we're going to basically have those two things, with the third thing being the combination of those two things. Got that? That's limbs. The body, the torso. It's going to be upper body, the shoulder girdle, or it's going to be the hip girdle. That's it. And then we're going to work three things for up here and here, and then we're going to be, two of them are going to be the same, and the third one is combining them. Then we're going to get those two segments, and then we're going to link them. And that's a transition. So if you have a limb, whether it's straight or bent or both, or you're trying to get that and it's not working, we're going to show you the links to transition to the torso. If you have the torso and you have to switch back to a limb because they became compliant or a partner came in and it's conducive to the task, your role will be to shift from torso to limb. And when the suspect is grounded, we will always control hands and hips right away. If you get to the scene and I have hands, you get hips. If I have hips, you get hands. Why? If somebody has hands, that individual is not striking anybody. They physically, mechanically cannot. They are not reaching for weapons. They physically and mechanically cannot. And if somebody has hips, you killed their locomotion. They're not leaving the scene. Everything slows down. I know this is rudimentary. I know this is elemental, is basic, but I'm not seeing it. I'm just not seeing it. So if that's the sport in the game, why the hell are we doing all these other things that an elite player would do? The best in the game would do that. You don't teach a team that way. I've coached wrestling. I've coached different sports. I obviously coach jiu-jitsu and judo and jiu-jitsu, and I've coached MMA fighters. You're not doing all this fancy shit. We all know it's common sense. What is the highest percentage stuff that's going to be played in a sport? And to be clear, an individual combat sport, they get more and more regulated and the rules get tighter and tighter. But if we leave it very open, that's not the reality of an officer. They're not a fighter. They're not fighting. That can happen, but that's not the job. That's not the role. And that's not what happens most of the time. So full circle to the person that's trying to resist arrest actively, but he's not fighting. We're going to control limbs and torso. We're going to control hands and hips. And we're going to train every opportunity we can to do that, because that is the majority of the problems. That is the majority of the career. And if we get our players to get really good and confident at that, they will get really confident in that, and they will go and do this in a calm state. No F-bombs, which is what our footage shows. Nothing. They will just get it done. And the suspect will comply quicker. And the quicker they are mechanically controlled and at ease, because we're at ease, that solves a ton of problems that can escalate later. And that's the paradigm shift I want you to start seeing. And if these 19 or 20 minutes of me rambling on about it has got your interest, please stay tuned, and I will slowly break down what we're doing and how we're doing it, and I'll address your questions as necessary. And I hope this then shifts law enforcement defensive tactics, much like 99, that VHS set slowly started doing the same, but to a much greater extent. I do believe that at 60 years of age, this is where it ends with me, because this is where it begins. I feel like this is the Rosetta Stone. This is what was needed that wasn't being looked at. And the actual curriculum, which we'll discuss, which is very important, the training methods, the teaching methods, and the way we evaluate things is what's the secret sauce. That's what's coming, and hopefully you guys will come out and you'll actually see it for yourselves. Thank you.